It is the most wonderful time of the year. It is NCAA Tournament week. Welcome into a basketball-themed edition of SEC Football Unfiltered, our podcast from the USA Today Network. I'm Blake Toppmeyer alongside John Adams. We know the brackets. The first four begins, well, depending on when you're listening to this, perhaps tonight, perhaps it's already started. And then the main event, course, begins with the round of 64 on Thursday. John, first things first, the SEC led all conferences by getting 10 selections. Two SEC teams were among the first four out. That is Oklahoma and Auburn heading up the list of first four out. What did you think of the SEC's bid haul? And do you buy that Oklahoma and or Auburn were snubbed? Or do you think the committee did an appropriate job?
Well, I guess it depends on what numbers you value most: a one-loss record or strength of schedule. One thing that the committee apparently doesn't do anymore is how teams are playing at the end of the season. That used to be a measuring stick. If that had been the case, I think Oklahoma would have gotten in.
Mm-hmm.
I thought Oklahoma was playing so much better late in the year. And when I look at those teams, Oklahoma and Auburn, again, depending on what criteria you use, you look at those teams and say they could be some competitive against some really good teams. Just watch them play. There's some certainly some talent out there, but then we want to give the mid majors a chance too. So it's complicated. The SEC can't really complain much about getting that many teams in. Look, I mean, you got 14 in last year, so there's certainly no anti SEC sentiment out there. They're the big dogs, and if not for last year, people would be talking about what a great year for SEC basketball. Oh my gosh, it's not a football conference anymore. But that's an old story now because of last year with 14 teams in Florida winning the national title.
Yeah, it's interesting, John, because a lot of the drama and the build-up to Selection Sunday was Auburn or Miami, Ohio. And of course, Bruce Pearl contributed to a lot of that drama with his comments about Miami, Ohio, and how if they didn't win the MAC tournament and lost even one game, they should not be in the main event, and Auburn should be in instead. But when it came down to Selection Sunday, I thought that Oklahoma, much like you did, had the better case than what Auburn did. Now, I don't think it's an egregious snub, or maybe not even snub at all, that Oklahoma was not in the field. They were 19 and 15 overall. As you mentioned, they finished the season playing pretty well. They went 7 and 3 in their final 10. They had more quad 1, quad 2 wins than what Auburn had. So again, if somebody was snubbed, I don't think it was Auburn. I think it was Oklahoma when you consider how they were playing at the end of the season, and when you consider that they had more quad 1, quad 2 wins combined than what Auburn did. So, in so much as anybody was snubbed, I think it was Oklahoma. But do I think Oklahoma should have been in over 31-1 Miami, Ohio? Again, that it's kind of like you said, John. It depends on what you value. Miami, Ohio obviously did not play a very tough schedule. And yet I do sort of have a problem with acting like the first 31 games that they played meant nothing just because they lose one game in their conference tournament. I don't have a problem with Miami, Ohio being in. In fact, I think they should have been in. They're in the first four. Oklahoma misses out. I don't know. I guess next time lose 14 games instead of 15 games and don't wait till the end of the season to get hot as Oklahoma did.
I think, Blake, probably the fairest and most just way to resolve this would be conferences can determine which team they want to represent them in the NCAA tournament. They can have the tournament champion or the regular season champion do it. That would be one way to do it. In that way, Miami would have gotten the automatic bid.
It's interesting, John, is all the scrutiny over Miami, Ohio. I'm not so sure if Oklahoma should have been in. It should have been at Miami, Ohio's expense, or maybe it should have been at SMU's expense. Or, I mean, what's so great about Texas's resume? Another SEC team talking about. But as you look at Oklahoma and Texas head to head, Oklahoma recently beat Texas. I know the result was flipped earlier in the season, but if you look at the most recent result right before the SEC tournament, Oklahoma won that game. Texas was no great shakes down the stretch of the season. So, again, it depends on what you're looking at. A lot of scrutiny on Miami, Ohio because of their strength of schedule, but they did go 31-1. Whereas I think you can look inside the SEC even and say, if you want to take a stand for Oklahoma because the way they finished the season and finished with 19 wins, well, then I look at Texas and say, well, what, Texas is 17-14 and went 5-5 in their last 10. So maybe it should have been Texas left out, and not Miami, Ohio, and you flip in Oklahoma for Texas. You can split this any number of ways, and to me, if you can't make a 68 team tournament, well, I probably don't have a ton of sympathy for you.
Blake, one way you also could look at it, we were talking about if teams are playing well at the end of the year. Look at Ole Miss in the SEC tournament. 4-14 in the conference in the regular season, and it's knocking off one team after another in the SEC. Teams that are going to make the NCAA tournament. How does that even happen? But it reminds us about how crazy this March is and about how crazy the NCAA tournament can be. Teams get hot. They get in a zone, whatever you want to call it, and the next thing you know, they far exceeded regular season expectations, and they're contributing to upset mania in the tournament.
Bottom line, before we move on to some other NCAA tournament topics, John, did the committee get it right? Would you have had Oklahoma or Auburn in? And if you would have taken one of them, who would you have left out?
Well,
I'm holding your feet to the fire here.
I am a Southerner and sort of and as you know, a fan of Oklahoma, the state. I'm
sure.
Not saying
yes.
I bleed Boomer Sooner, but or scream Boomer Sooner. Yes, so I would probably pick Oklahoma. I don't know. I might like to see that old gauge revived where who's playing well at the end of the year, the last 10 games. Because when I look at the tournament, I want to see, when I watch a team play, I want to say, well, how could that team handle one of the best teams in the country? Could it be competitive, or it would be an utter blowout? And some of those teams, that are playing well in the late in the year, they probably could do that. So I would have had Oklahoma in, I think. The thing about Auburn, brutal schedule. But if Auburn could have come closer in some of those losses to top-ranked teams, I would view it a little differently. It had some real blowout losses amongst its losses to higher-ranked teams.
Yeah, I don't. Just to put a pin in this, I didn't see a huge snub. I think if I would have had to make one change, I might have taken Oklahoma and not Texas because of the way they were playing toward the end of the season. Texas lost 3 in a row down the stretch, lost to Ole Miss, who, as you mentioned, was really bad during the regular season until they got hot in the tournament. Lost to Oklahoma right before the tournament. But as you pointed out, the committee doesn't really look at that last 10 games the way they used to. But for me, I might have gone with the hot hand, picked Oklahoma, swapped out Texas, and left Miami, Ohio alone, left them right where they are in the first 4. But overall, bigger topics to discuss because it's really not about who is the 69th and 70th and 71st team. It's about who can now spring an upset, who can go to the Final Four, all those good types of things as everyone starts filling out their bracket. Isn't that what just the beauty of this tournament, John? So many things to love about it, but I think the bracket is just ubiquitous with this tournament, and it's people that maybe would never otherwise dream of betting on sports. You don't have to be a gambling fiend to throw down $5 and enter a bracket pool. People that maybe don't even really follow sports outside the Super Bowl, but if you get a bracket in there, oh, you've got an interest now, and you're trying to pick the right upset. Who's the 12 versus the 5? Who's the 11 over the 6? And I like the symmetry of it all too. Nice, neat, and clean. 64 teams. I mean, the first 4. Sure, it is what it is. It's the appetizer, but for most of us, we really consider the true tournament starting on Thursday. And again, I love that symmetry. It's not hard to understand. Anybody can follow it.
In addition to a bracket, I do a draft with my wife, mother-in-law, and brother-in-law.
You draft teams, players?
Yeah, we draft teams. Yeah.
Uh-huh. Okay.
And I've won going away the past 2 seasons.
And
so
is this an attempt to draft the national champion, or do you get points?
No, you get points per round. Yeah.
Okay.
I totally dominated the last 2 years, and kind of.
If you had the number 1 pick in your draft, not to give away your strategy for this family event you got going on here, but if you had the number 1 pick, I don't know if you've decided that yet, but which team would you take with the number 1 pick in this type of draft? Is it the number 1 overall seed Duke, or do you like someone else maybe with the number 1 pick of if you're drafting teams here?
I would probably pick Arizona, but that would be a strategy involved, because I think my competition will all pick number 1 seeds. So I would take them and then hope to get Houston in the next round. That would be my strategy.
Okay, so you'd like Arizona and then Houston with your next pick.
Man. Yeah, I don't mean to sound cocky.
Yeah, you do.
Okay. Sounding cocky, I really think I'll run away with the competition for the 3rd straight year. I think I may dominate more than UConn did in its prime the last few years in the men's tournament.
You said your mother-in-law is in this, John?
Yeah, Margie doesn't really watch much basketball. And but she likes doing the draft.
Sure.
So, and sometimes we'll help draft teams far.
I do a player draft with a few friends, John, and it's like a snake draft. And what you're doing is it's cumulative point total. So we all draft 6 players. You can't draft somebody, once he's off the board, he's off the board, in snake draft style. And so you want high scores, but it's also kind of a trick of, you don't just want high scores. You want guys that are going to be around into the later stages. If you take some guy who averages 25 a game, but he gets beaten round 1, well, you're in trouble. You'd be better off with a guy who averages 14 a game, but he's playing to the national finals. So a lot of star power in this tournament. I believe I have like the 4th overall pick.
So who's your pick? Well, you may.
It's hard to know who's still going to be out there, but
who do you think? Okay. Who would be the top?
Who would Boozer's be the top probably going to be off the board. Cameron Boozer's probably going to be off the board for Duke, right? And so then who's going to be left at number 4? I'm kind of hoping to get Braden Burries from Arizona, the leading scorer, because I like Arizona like you do, and Burries goes for about 20 a game. I really like Jaden Bradley, the senior point guard from Arizona as well, but I'm thinking maybe you could get him later in the draft. I don't think I'll take him with the number 4 overall pick, but I think if Braden Burries, the freshman guard for Arizona, is there at number 4, I think I'll probably take him.
So you pick how many players?
6 players.
And it's based on total points.
Total points in the tournament.
I might do that because I know players better than any of my competition is, and that would be kind of a.
So you want to take some more money off your mother-in-law?
Well, yeah, we don't even put up really any money, it's just for the glory. And I think I might present that possibility, and I think I could win that by even a larger margin. So thanks for telling me, Al.
You got it. All right. Well, which kind of segues into my next question, John, as we were talking about how we both like Arizona. I wonder if that's because, do we think they're the best team, or do we like the region draw that they're in? And I'm wondering if you've identified one of these 4 regions as being the toughest. And I know it's sometimes hard to keep track of the geographic locations of the region. So if you just remember who the number 1 seed is in the toughest region, that works too. I can see you scrambling to find a bracket here.
Yeah.
And so I'm going to bat lead off
some,
here.
Yeah. Let me go.
Yeah. Okay. Well, I'm going to cover for you, John.
I've got like 27 notebooks here.
Sure. Well, I'm going to cover for you while you're trying to find a bracket, because I think the toughest region is the one Duke is in. It's interesting. Duke got the number 1 overall seed, and yet I thought the committee did them no favors in the East region. Much like last year, if you recall, John, Auburn got the number 1 overall seed, and I thought the committee put them in one of the toughest regions. Well, I think it's the same way this year with Duke. The 2 seed in that region is UConn. The 3 seed is Michigan State. Number 4 is Kansas. Number 5 is St. John's. Now think about who coaches those teams.
Yeah.
That's Dan Hurley, Tom Izzo, Bill Self, and Rick Pitino. That is a who's who of college basketball coaches in with, oh, hey, enjoy your number 1 overall seed, Duke. Now you got to go through that murderer's row just to make the Final Four. And I think Duke maybe can do it. They've got probably the best team in the country, even with a couple of injuries. They're very, very good. But I think that's a loaded region. And that's one reason why I like Arizona to win the tournament is I like Arizona's region draw a little bit better than I like Duke's.
Well, to that point, no matter, in most tournaments, there are a few exceptions, but in most tournaments, somebody has a really close call along the way, and before it wins the national championship, and maybe in an early round.
Yeah, that happened with Florida last year. They had to win a few thrillers.
You just don't know. So you kind of don't want to use that tournament luck more than once. You want to save it. I do like. I agree with you. That is with Duke in there, and I look at that a lot. Like UConn, Dan Hurley being the coach. This UConn team isn't as talented as the 2 national championship teams, but I didn't think his second team could go back to back. I just think that's too hard to do, to win back-to-back national titles. But they did it with Hurley. So I kind of look at Hurley as a guy, he knows how to win in this tournament. I don't have any stats for that, but I just have it's sort of an image thing. And I think the same way about Rick Pitino. He never won back-to-back national titles, but I've seen so many of his teams play well in big games and play well against the very best teams in the country. So I don't count him out. So you're right. And another factor in it with me in that region with Duke, I've seen some Duke teams, even with Coach K, even when they were like the program, I saw them lose some games that you didn't think they would lose.
Yeah.
And it's funny how in covering a lot of NCAA tournaments, how many times in regional tournaments that most of the fans in the arena, when they weren't pulling for their team in that region, they were pulling against Duke.
Yeah, you mentioned the coaches, John, because it's interesting. I do put a lot of stock in a coach's NCAA tournament track record, fair or unfair. I mean, that rings kind of large in your mind as you're putting pen to paper on these brackets, and you think, well, this coach, punches above his weight class in the NCAA tournament versus another coach maybe who really isn't very good in the tournament. I mean, every year, that's why I have a difficult time seeing Tennessee go to the Final Four, because it has no history of doing that. And Rick Barnes, as consistent as he's been at Tennessee, never can get the Vols to the Final Four. And I look at like Matt Painter, another coach. Now, they did get to finish as national runner-up a couple years ago, but before that point, Matt Painter, for all of his success, was sort of in that Rick Barnes camp, a very consistent, high-winning coach. But when it came to tournament time, he always fell short of the Final Four at Purdue. And so that does kind of weigh in the mind, I think, as I'm looking at brackets, because it's almost like two different seasons. Like, you got your coaches who are great in the regular season, and then you got your coaches who are great in the tournament. Some are great at both, and others sort of specialize in one more than others. And that does give me pause when I see those coaches, such as a Rick Barnes, that that just has a history of kind of running into a wall in March every year.
I got an email from a Tennessee fan about that. I probably get that same email every year, usually multiple versions of it. And he says, "How do you explain that? Why do Rick Barnes's teams peak in January and not in March?" I don't know that they always peak in January. I just know he wins a lot of games and he beats a lot of good teams. It's not as though he has an inflated record. In his time at Tennessee and elsewhere, he's beaten a lot of these very talented teams. Um, I wonder. I know he's a tough, demanding coach, and maybe the Vols get a little worn down mentally, physically as the season goes along. I don't have a really good explanation for it. Or the other way of looking at it is maybe they just weren't as talented as I thought they were. They were
And,
talented,
and the other thing is, John, I mean, he's gone to the Elite Eight the last couple years, so
Yeah,
it's not like he's trending down. He's actually kind of trending up in terms of the NCAA tournament trajectory. There was a while there where he kind of earned the nickname of second round Rick. At this point, I think that nickname needs to be updated at least to Sweet 16 Rick or Elite Eight Rick. I mean, definitely not Final Four Rick. That would be inappropriate. But I think second round Rick has become outdated and it's more Sweet 16 Rick at this point.
Yeah, one of my emailers even calls him one and done.
Yeah,
And
that's
like
way
that
outdated.
no, that doesn't it might sound good, but it's I guess it's Elite Eight and out the gate now.
Ooh, yeah, that's got a certain ring to it, which really isn't that biting of a criticism.
No,
I mean,
it's not.
On the flip side of things, John, which coach, I guess maybe which SEC coach do you trust the most in the tournament at this point?
Oh, it's Todd Golden
Mm.
at Florida. I mean,
Mhm.
I just voted him for SEC Coach of the Year. I don't see how he really had that much competition. When I look back on how Florida won last year, and you mentioned it, Walter Clayton, the point guard, had a great tournament, hit all those clutch shots. But Florida was down in a number of those games. A few of those games, I think 4 of them were decided by single digits, and it often came down to those final minutes. Texas Tech, a very talented team, easily could have beaten Florida. And I give Golden a lot of credit for that in those close games. When a team wins, that impresses me more maybe than a coach's team dominates. If he can push the right buttons. And one thing Golden does, and you see it anytime you watch Florida play, it was apparent again in the SEC tournament, even though it didn't play well. I didn't think it played well in either game. It won one, lost one. It's a very competitive team. I think UConn's that way under Dan Hurley. They compete with each other, even in practice. It's all about competition. And so that to me makes, I can't, when you say I can't imagine you naming anybody else now, even though John Calipari and Rick Barnes are Hall of Fame coaches, no doubt about it. But right now, who would you most trust among all the SEC coaches to lead their teams to a Final Four? And I think it's Todd Golden. He's the easy choice. What do you think about Nate Oates? He's been to the Final Four with Alabama.
I think Nate Oates would be the other one I'd put up there pretty high. Now that obviously they have some off the court drama to contend with the felony arrest of one of their players this week. Did you see that news, John, breaking right before we went to record here? Alabama dealing with an arrest.
I thought you were referring to a couple of years ago. Who?
No, Aiden Holloway, who's their number 2 scorer, is facing an arrest for, according to the allegations from police, had possession of a pound of marijuana, which I don't know, maybe it's, in the old school, you see a headline of arrested for weed, and it's like you throw the book at him. Now I kind of got to remind myself, like, oh yeah, you can still get arrested for weed these days. But apparently, if you have a pound of weed in Alabama, that's a no-no. I'm learning. So he's facing a felony arrest charge. But with Nate Oates' history, I mean, it'll probably give him a Congressional Medal of Honor. I mean, that player discipline, not necessarily high on his list, as I recall from a few years ago. But in the tournament, to get back to your original question, John, do I trust Nate Oates in the tournament? In fact, I do. I do trust Nate Oates in the tournament because I don't think he's going to be thinking about player discipline and suspending players. Never mind what they're doing off the court.
Yeah,
you look at his history in the tournament, and last year Alabama was in the Elite Eight. Year before that, they're in the Final Four. He's got a couple Sweet 16 runs at Alabama on top of that. So, getting back to your question of if not Todd Golden, who would I want coaching my team in the tournament? I might go with Nate Oates, in part because when players get arrested, do I really think he's going to suspend him? I don't know. Maybe Nate Oates will prove me wrong and suspend Aiden Holloway here. No word on that yet as we record this on a Monday. But
out on bond in the tournament.
There you go. There's your headline.
Yeah,
there's your headline. How seriously are you taking Arkansas after their SEC tournament win, John? You were all over them. We were talking about the tournament last week, and you were quick to mention Arkansas and how you liked the way they were playing, and you were right on there. They win the tournament, but we see this sometimes where a team gets hot in a conference tournament, and that doesn't necessarily mean anything for March Madness. So, are you buying in on Arkansas? Did you? Does it really matter to you that they won the conference tournament? What do you think of their stock now? It's on the rise, but are you buying in?
Well, the thing I like most about Arkansas is Darius Acuff.
Mm-hmm.
He's one of the best players I've ever seen in the SEC. A freshman too. I mean, this guy looks like a fourth or maybe even a 5-year senior. He can really control the game, take over a game. He'll get you double figure assists and 30 points in the same game. He's a handful. And I think Arkansas has pretty good role players, other players who can step up, and it's got players who can do a lot of different things. So I really like Arkansas. And if it would not shock me if Arkansas made the Final Four. I think Arkansas is capable of playing a great game, the kind of game it takes to beat a number 1 seed.
What do you think Kentucky fans would do if you offered them a trade right now? So you could have John Calipari back, or you could have Mark Pope.
They'd say, "Can we have Rick Pitino?"
Good answer. Good answer. Option C. Go for door number 3. Always take door number 3. Yeah, don't settle for door 1
or maybe get Bruce Pearl out of retirement.
Yeah, what's Billy Donovan up to these days?
Yeah.
Scott Drew.
Well, what do you think they'd say?
I think they'd say exactly what you said.
Oh, yeah.
We'll take Rick Pitino. I don't think they'd want to admit that they'd take Calipari back, but boy, in this moment, things are not. I've been sucked in by Kentucky the last few years, particularly the final couple few seasons Calipari was there. I thought they were going to make noise in the NCAA tournament. I really liked their teams, and then poof, they go splat against St. Peter's. Poof, they go splat against Oakland, and now this year, I'm really fading the Cats. I was duped by them the past few years. This year, I'm out on the Cats. I do not like the way they're playing. They've really all year had this tendency of burying themselves in a big hole early and then trying to mount a furious rally in the second half, and that's just a hard way to do business. And here they are as a 7 seed, I think, against a dangerous opponent, number 10 Santa Clara in round 1. So, yeah, I don't know. I don't think that I don't think Big Blue Nation's probably buying more stock in Mark Pope right now. Would they admit that they'd take Calipari back? I don't know that either. I think they're probably saying, give us whatever's behind door number 3, whatever that may be. Rick Pitino, somebody else.
Can you imagine what Kentucky basketball might have been like for the last 30 years if Rick Pitino had never left?
I think they'd probably have more banners hanging than they do now. I'll say that.
Yeah. When I watched this Kentucky team, there was a time around the middle of the season that I started thinking maybe these guys are getting it together. They had a couple of really nice comeback wins. They beat Tennessee twice.
Mhm.
I just thought maybe they're finally coming together. But one thing I never thought, I didn't think it looked like a typical Kentucky team from the standpoint of talent. All these Kentucky teams that disappeared from the tournament way sooner than anybody thought they should have. All the teams that did make the Final Four are the national champions. Even they had very high level talent. They've got, I mean, Calipari's players are ex players are scattered all over the NBA, and they aren't just hanging around a roster. They're going to play in all-star games. The talent that Kentucky amassed and really did so little with, when you think about it, it's pretty astounding. But I see this Kentucky team. I just don't. I like Otega Owe a lot. He's when he decides to go to the basket, there's nobody in the league that can stop him. I really like him. But other than that, Denzel Aberdeen has his moments. Different players have had good games, but the overall talent just isn't there.
No, I agree. I agree with you. Which brings us to, what's your first round upset special, John? Because my first round upset special, I've got a few of them, but just to mention one with SEC times, I'm picking Santa Clara to beat Kentucky in that 7-10 game in St. Louis. Santa Clara was the West Coast Conference's runner-up. That was a good league this year. Of course, Gonzaga won it. No surprise there. But Santa Clara beat St. Mary's twice. St. Mary's is in the tournament. They're a tournament regular. They're back in it this year as a 7 seed. The West Coast Conference is a 3-bid league. As I said, Santa Clara was actually the runner-up. They can go for 80-plus points. I watched them play a few times this year in late-night games. I think they got a pretty good squad. And if you remember, John, the last time Kentucky got a look at the West Coast Conference, granted it was Gonzaga and not Santa Clara, but Gonzaga beat them by 35 points.
Yeah.
So if that's any endorsement of the West Coast Conference, then Kentucky ought to be on upset alert in this 7-10 game. So that's one of my first-round upsets I'm eyeing. Do you spot anything in the first round?
Well, based on what Kentucky's done, yeah, I think that's a very viable upset pick. I look at another 7-10 game involving an SEC team, Miami and Missouri. I think Missouri could win that game. Missouri's kind of an odd Jekyll and Hyde type team. Illinois beat it by 1,000,000 points. Then it bounces back and beats Florida. One thing I'll say about it, it has a short memory because it often follows up very bad games with really good games. And another thing I like about Missouri, win or lose, you don't think of it as a team that's going to, oh, it's the NCAA tournament. I can't make a mistake. No, Missouri under Dennis Gates plays pretty loose. And I think that can be to its advantage in the NCAA tournament.
Yeah, that one's interesting because when the draw came out, it was like, oh my goodness, the committee gave them as a 10 seed basically a first round home game. They're playing in St. Louis against Miami. I thought, what a gift from the committee. And then as one of my friends pointed out to me, well, the last time Missouri played in St. Louis, they lost by 43 points. That was that Illinois bragging rights game you mentioned. So that, okay, maybe I'm making too much of this home court advantage situation. Yes, they did lose by 43 points the last time they appeared in St. Louis there. But and I also, they're not playing particularly well lately, but how much does that matter? I don't know. Again, we see teams all the time. They win the conference tournament and everybody then takes them and go to the Final Four. You think I'm going to ride the hot hand. And then they lose in round 1 or round 2. Or then you see a team that's kind of limping in. And next thing you know, they're in the Sweet 16. So bottom line, the tournament is an unpredictable business. But okay, so we got a couple 7-10 upsets there involving SEC teams. You're taking Missouri to beat Miami. I'm taking Santa Clara, a 10 seed, to upset Kentucky. As far as SEC team facing the most pressure, John, do you think is that a no-brainer? Is that Kentucky and Mark Pope facing the most pressure? Do you think there's any other real candidate there from the SEC anyway facing the most pressure?
You could ask me that every year, and the answer would be Kentucky. Just look in the stands at the SEC tournament. I mean, even though that tournament doesn't really matter that much, boy, it matters to Kentucky. It matters to fans who paid their way down there, who bought a ticket and are paying for a hotel room. They love their Wildcats, and they expect to win always. So, yeah, I think it's all. Is Mark Pope's job in jeopardy?
I don't think so. I guess I would probably more say if they get bounced in the first round of the tournament, could be in jeopardy next season.
Because did Mark Stoops, Kentucky's football coach, did he get a buyout?
$38 million, but not all at once. But yeah,
no, that's what I was wondering. So they could be paying two coaches if they made a change.
Yeah, and you're getting a new athletic director there at Kentucky as well, Mitch Barnhart. They strapped him into the golden parachute into some made-up role that they're going to pay him an exorbitant salary for.
Does he get to go to the games?
He does get to go to games with free tickets. Gets to keep his golf club membership and make almost $1 million a year for some made up job. And what did he do for Kentucky? Well, he did a lot of good things. He also was responsible for that aforementioned $38 million buyout that went to Mark Stoops. Thanks for your services. Here's your golden parachute. Go ahead and collect $1 million as you pass go. So but because of that AD transition, John, yeah. I think Mark Pope's probably I think he's safe now, regardless of what happens in the tournament. But he's going to be facing a lot of heat, no doubt about it, if he loses in round one.
I don't think our company, Gannett, doesn't have a columnist consultant's job, does it?
We don't. No, we were wishing that maybe they did. We thought you could be good for that. You ready for that golden parachute? Somebody wanted to strap you into a golden parachute. As long as the ripcord worked, you'd say, put me in that baby today.
Yeah, I would look at it as an opportunity to help others.
Sure. Help yourself. Those gold doubloons stuffed in your pocket. I might be a little young still for the golden parachute. I probably ought to hold out a little bit longer. But you're a prime. If they were handing out gold parachutes and I were you, I'd be first in line, John.
You know what they would say about me? Gosh, isn't he a little bit old to be consulted?
Does he know how to work this parachute?
Oh man.
But we digress. But no, I think Kentucky's the runaway winner of facing the most pressure from the SEC. Here's one, and they came up earlier, John, but this one is not in the same orbit as Kentucky pressure. But little trivia question for you, okay? How many NCAA tournament games has Missouri won since joining the SEC? I'll let you think about it. Let it marinate for a minute as I lay out the backdrop here. You know, when Missouri came into this conference, you thought, well, they're going to do pretty well in the SEC. They'd had a nice run in the Big 12, went to some Elite Eights, hadn't been to a Final Four, but it was an NCAA tournament regular.
Yeah.
Like I said, had a few Elite Eights there, one in the 90s, a couple in the 2000s. And then they come into the SEC, and what have they done? So there's your trivia question, John. How many NCAA tournament games has Missouri won in the more than one decade they've been in the SEC? Do you know the answer to that question?
Well, I don't remember Missouri winning any game.
So you're thinking maybe zero.
So I'll say none.
It was actually one. It was 3 years ago. They were in a 7-10 game. They beat Utah State. Now, you may not remember that win because of what happened next. They were bounced from the tournament in the second round by number 15 seed Princeton. A golden opportunity for Missouri to get into the Sweet 16. Would have been their first Sweet 16 since joining the SEC. No, 15 seed Princeton bounced them. a decade after, well, I guess 11 years actually after Norfolk State bounced him in the first round. Norfolk State being a 15 seed. So it's not Kentucky level pressure, but I think playing a de facto home game in St. Louis, and Missouri's 1-5 in NCAA tournament games since joining the SEC, and you actually go back a few years before that, and the record's even worse. It's not been a good run for Missouri in the NCAA tournament the last 15 years. And now here they are, as I say, with the de facto home game in round one. So not Kentucky level pressure, but as I look for an SEC team that might be facing some modicum of pressure in the NCAA tournament, I think Missouri's another one that comes to mind.
You covered Missouri, so you can answer this. Do you think Missouri fans are one of those fan bases that expect the worst?
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah, they are Charlie Brown waiting for Lucy to pull the football away.
Yeah.
No doubt about it. And they know it too. They wear it well. I will say that. Missouri fans are pretty good natured about it. They're like constantly looking over their shoulder like Lucy's coming to yank that football away.
Well, here we go again. Has been uttered a few times at their sporting events.
No question about it. Okay, so there's our teams facing some pressure, John. Another topic for you. How about your Final Four? That's like the most common question this time of year. Usually it's a two-parter. Who's your upset pick? We got that out of the way. And then the follow-up question is, who do you have in the Final Four? Do I need to give you a moment, give you my Final Four?
Yeah, go ahead and give your Final Four.
Okay. You're searching. I see you scrambling around there.
Yeah, I've got this big notebook.
Sifting through your notes. Okay, my Final Four, John. I think Duke, the East region, is going to be too much for Duke. And I think someone else emerges out of that region. Difficult to decide on a team, but I'm going to go with the 3 seed, Michigan State, to emerge from the East. I like chalk in the West with Arizona. I probably like Arizona as much as I like any team in this tournament. All 5 starters average double digits per game. They say old guards win in March. We saw that last year at Florida, in particular, Walter Clayton Jr. in the phenomenal tournament he had. Well, Arizona's got a senior point guard, Jaden Bradley. If old guards win in March, then I think Big 12 Player of the Year, Jaden Bradley, is going to be an incredible asset for Arizona. I'll go with chalk in the Midwest region as well and back Michigan. Michigan's Dusty May has been sort of a godsend to make everybody forget about Sharon Moore and the debacle that was the end of Michigan's football season there, not just on the field, but very notably off the field as well. But nobody's thinking about that right now because Dusty May is doing incredible things for Michigan. I say Michigan gets to the Final Four, so that's my second 1 seed. And then I'm going to cap it at 2 1 seeds because I'm going to take Houston to get to the Final Four out of the South region as a 2 seed. Houston's got a nice blend of veterans and some very good freshmen as well. I think it's a really healthy blend. Not Kelvin Sampson's best team. I think that was last year's team that was a national runner-up. But I'll say this one gets to the Final Four, which would mean no SEC teams in the Final Four if my predictions hold true. So there you have it. I've got Michigan State, Michigan, Arizona, and Houston in my Final Four.
Okay, I've got UConn.
UConn coming out of the East, okay.
Arizona.
We both like Arizona.
Iowa State.
Ooh, all right. 2 seed Iowa State.
And Houston.
I like it. Houston. Okay, lots of love for the Big 12. 3 Big 12 teams. I like that. That's I think the Big 12, the SEC got the most bids. Kudos to them. I think the Big 12 is the best conference.
It's kind of like what we talked about so much in football. The SEC might have had the deepest conference, but the Big 10 at the top was better. I think the Big 12 is better at the top.
John, would you say Florida last team standing from the SEC, or you think someone outlasts Florida?
No, I think Florida's the last team standing. And although I didn't pick it to make the Final Four, my main reason for that was not how poor it looked against Vanderbilt, and I was wrong about UConn, but I just think it's so hard to win back-to-back national championships. UConn did that. But if you go back and look at Florida and how it won last year, had a really good front line last year, some of the same guys. I love that front line. but the star was in the backcourt, and it doesn't have a
Yep.
Walter Clayton back there. I just don't see how it's quite good enough that at some point in the tournament, maybe when you least expect it, Florida will come up empty too often from 3-point range or even perimeter. You watch teams defending Florida now, they they are coaxing, encouraging them to take that outside shot.
Yeah, I mentioned the old cliche, John, that old guards win in March. It might just be that clutch guards win in March, and
Yeah.
Florida had that in spades last year, and that's one reason why I don't like this Florida team as much. I still think this is they could get to the Final Four, sure, maybe they even repeat, but neither of us are picking them to make the Final Four. I say they bow out around the Elite Eight stage, and one of the reasons is Florida's front court is sensational. Their backcourt this year is, just kind of good. Not certainly not great. Last year's backcourt was great.
Yeah, I think you need a little of both. You can't win solely with a great front line. You can't win just with the dynamic backcourt. You need to play well pretty much in every area to get through 6 games in the NCAA tournament, and I see other teams more capable of doing that than Florida. Anybody can have an off night shooting, and Florida has the capacity to make up for that with its front line play. But also, Florida is going to play some teams in this tournament. It may be better than its opponent on the front line, but it might not be overwhelmingly better as it was we saw in a number of SEC games this year where competition just wasn't there against the likes of Florida's front line.
Last thing on the way out the door, John. Last year, the SEC completely took over the Sweet 16, and then Florida stood tall for the conference at the finish line, delivering a national championship. This year, it's going to be much harder for the SEC to take over the Sweet 16 in the same way. For one, they don't have as many teams in. They led everybody with 10 bids, but that's not the 14 bids that they had last year. But I think more importantly is the seeding. Florida is the only team from the SEC with a top 3 seed in any region. So the SEC goes deep, but it doesn't have, outside of Florida, that like premier level team, at least in terms of seeding. But my question to you is, if you had to pick a sleeper from the SEC to make the Elite Eight, so that would be someone other than Florida, someone seeded 4th or worse, be it Alabama, Arkansas, Vanderbilt, Tennessee. I'm omitting some teams, but who would be your sleeper if you had to pick somebody from the SEC that can make the Elite Eight aside from Florida?
Well, the schedule is tough. I think Arkansas is capable of that.
Mm-hmm.
I also think Vanderbilt is. Vanderbilt can be really good from the perimeter, and it's better than you think usually inside. I was impressed with its defense later in the year, and it certainly looked great against Florida, although that might have had something more to do with Florida not caring enough in the SEC tournament. But I think either one of those teams, if Arkansas or Vanderbilt made it to the Elite Eight, I wouldn't be shocked at all by that. And again, I like Darius Acuff so much at Arkansas. We've seen in this tournament where great players have just grabbed their team by the collar and just dragged them through the tournament. They can do that. He's good enough to do that. He'd be my first pick. I hadn't seen all the lottery pick candidates, but he would be my first pick. And I don't see that with Alabama, even if its players are all out of jail. I don't see that. I think Tennessee. I see Tennessee as capable of upsetting people, and I could see Tennessee with one upset. I could see it winning in the second round and getting to the Sweet 16, but I don't think it could win 2 of those games back to back. Tennessee's probably going to have 3 tough games.
Yeah, I think I agree with you. The 2 teams I would like most as potential SEC Elite Eight sleepers would probably be Arkansas and Vanderbilt. If I had to choose one, I think I'd pick Vanderbilt. I picked them as my SEC tournament sleeper. They reached the finish line before bowing out against Arkansas there in the finals. I really like Vanderbilt's guard play. They can get hot from three. A number of guys shoot, around the 40% clip from 3-point range, and love the sophomore guard Tyler Tanner. So if I had to pick an SEC sleeper aside from Florida to make the Elite Eight, I think I would go Vanderbilt, and they could meet in a game that would send one of them to the Elite Eight. Their collision course there if both teams were to remain standing that long. We'll leave the conversation there. Good luck in your brackets. John, good luck in your draft against your family members. Take it easy on your mother-in-law. It's just good life advice, I think.
No.
Okay.
That's not how I roll. I don't want to just win. I want to dominate.
Okay. Ruthless. We'll be back next week to discuss the first week of the tournament. Enjoy the action. Thanks for listening to this basketball-themed edition of SEC Football Unfiltered.